Good evening. Welcome to the next edition of the Economic Archer podcast. Um, Today it's going to be an extension of a previous discussion, but also to answer some questions that I'm starting to get from some of the people that have been watching the podcast. So we've talked about previously about the banking crisis that happened in 2008 and the fact that they told us it was a liquidity problem, and they asked us as taxpayers to bail them out, $787 billion. And we also talked about the reality that when years passed from that and we look back, what actually happened was it was a lot bigger than just the banks ran into a just kind of out of nowhere liquidity problem. What happened is they were doing a lot of loans to people that really couldn't qualify for the loan they were given. And immediately after they would write the loan, they would sell the loan off to someone else, essentially getting that toxic asset off their balance sheet. And we gave them all that money. What happens in any situation where instead of forcing the person that caused the problem to deal with the consequences of the problem, if instead you just hand them a ton of money afterwards, not only do they not learn a lesson, if you remember in 2009 and 10, we were having all these, discussions on these too big to fail banks giving bonuses to their top executives that were just through the roof. So here they are, they've run their banks into the position where they're not solvent, they're going to go under. We reward them with taxpayer dollars and don't hold them accountable. I've already told you in previous videos, when they make huge profits, you don't hear them coming to the U.S. citizens and saying, hey, we made a really big profit this year and we're going to give some of that money to you. No. But when trouble comes, we're supposed to bail them out. We also learned that in the 2008 banking crisis that they did a bailout then, but they voted through the Dodd-Frank bill that going forward, they can legally do a bail-in. And I talked about what that meant. If you remember, we talked about the definition between bank bail-in and bail-out. And essentially what it is, instead of the bank having to go to Congress, say, we're going to go under, we need you to fund us through taxpayer dollars, they just take the money out of your account. The money you've deposited in the bank, they just take it out. And it's perfectly legal now that your congressmen and women have fixed it for us. Totally legal. They can just take your money. So I've had people calling me saying, are you serious? Like you're not hardly keeping any cash in the bank? I keep a little cash in the bank just to pay set bills. But as far as any of my savings that's not going directly toward monthly bills, no, I don't keep any in the bank. And people ask the question, well, how do you function then? Well, I told you on earlier videos, I think you need to have a relationship with bullion dealers, which is precious metals dealers, not just people that you buy in bulk from when you're making a large purchase. Like I told y'all, a couple of them that I use. One that I've had a lot of success with over the years is Cloud Resources, which operates under the name National Numismatic. They're out of Georgia. Tom Cloud has been in the precious metals market for about 45 years. Dan Scroggins, who I work with a lot there, both just wonderful people. And Tom actually puts out I think it's bi-monthly update. Sometimes it even comes out more often than that. But I buy from them. I think Miles Franklin, and I pointed specifically to Dunnigan Kaiser. I think they're definitely in the business for the right reasons. They're trying to get metals in the hands of people as affordably as possible. They're a very, very well backed business, and they can accommodate any of your needs also. But I think it's important you have a local bullion dealer that you deal with as well. And to do, the reason you need that is like just for unexpected expenses. So I told you, I try to sell enough gold or silver each month to be able to have the money I need, the cash I need to pay the bills for that month. If something unexpected comes up, you know, a washer goes out and you got to spend $1,000 you weren't expecting, just run to the bullion dealer, cash it out, you got cash in hand. But I've had some other people that have been reaching out and asking questions around their 401k, and they've been telling me how much money they're losing in their 401k, and I'm like, you don't have to do that. You can transfer your 401k over to, and like I use Equity Trust and Noble Gold, and I took my 401k, all of it, and I rolled it over into silver. It's silver bars. I mean, they store it for you. It's fully insured. They did an excellent job for me, so Noble Gold. But there's a lot of other people that can do it. I believe Miles Franklin that I mentioned earlier, they can do everything. Like if you want to, they'll even store it, you know, if you want to switch your 401k over. There's zero tax consequences if you roll your 401k from your company over into an IRA with Noble Gold or Miles Franklin, and they set up a trust account for you, and there's no tax consequences at all. You get the check sent to you, you send it in, seamless process. At the end of the year, you will get notification from your whoever you had your 401k with that you got the money from them, and then you just show the receipt of that entire amount with the trust company that you're working with, and there's no taxes. I really want to come to you today that we need to have a sense of urgency. If we're planning on rolling over 401ks, we need to do that soon. I talked to you last video about the Biden administration has made a couple of attempts to get some control over your 401ks to fund their green energy agenda. If you look back, this is not a new phenomenon. I told you that in 2010, 2011, and 2012 that under the Obama administration, they had made 3 different attempts to get control over your IRA/401k. So there should be a sense of urgency for you while you can take full control of your 401k, roll it over to a trust company, and get your money stored in precious metals. And I wanted to tell you what I read this morning that hopefully will give you a little bit more information if you're still kind of sitting on the fence. So I've told you the stages that we go through. You go from inflation to hyperinflation. You can see that happening right now. So we're at 8.6% inflation. That's year over year, but we've talked about it on previous podcasts. It's way higher than that. It's probably more like 17 to 20%. And the reason that it's so understated, they're not counting gas, they're not counting rent, a lot of the things that we have to pay each month. So it's not a very accurate assessment. What's interesting is back in 1980 when we had huge inflation under Jimmy Carter, or, you know, like for the later 70s when we were under Carter, it was horrible. I remember they used to keep a misery index to talk about how bad things were. But I think the reason they changed the way they calculate inflation is because they want you to think today it's not as bad as it was back then. It's actually worse. And the reason it's worse is we weren't back then we weren't even $2 trillion in debt. Now our national debt's 30.6 trillion. So we really don't have very many options. If you remember, if you read history, they raised interest rates to 21%. Like you go buy a house and you're paying a 21% mortgage rate. Just think about that. For every percent's like adding $100. You start talking about, for us to be able to stop inflation, what we would have to get it to. The reality, it's going to crush the housing market. But there's another reason of something I read this morning. So remember, we've talked about the fact that we've really been pushing all the way back since H.W. Bush for this one world government, this new world order. Well, so now all the banking systems are interconnected really across the world. So if a major bank falls in China, for example, it's going to have a ripple effect over here. And I've started reading articles about banks that have been withholding money from the people that had their money deposited in the bank since April over in China. And sadly, I read an article today that instead of the police supporting the people who are trying to get their money out of the bank, they were standing against the people, like the people were being, acting over the top for trying to go and get their funds out of the bank. I say that because that's a sign of things to come. We're not above that happening here. In fact, sadly, it's going to happen here. And it's happened here several times before in the history of our country. But the article that I had read that was talking about the 7 Chinese banks that are in trouble also alluded to banks in Japan, and they alluded to the banks in several other countries are in a similar situation. And that makes sense because our monetary systems are all entangled, because remember, we have the reserve currency, and a lot of these other countries, in order to buy energy like oil, they've had to buy US dollars. So everybody's intertwined. So I looked up and found this article from May 27th, 2020, and it was talking about the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission. And this is back in May of 2020, and they were talking about issues with Chinese banks. Last week, Evergrande, the largest, I believe, real estate bank in China, they defaulted on their loan payments, and I heard they stopped trading on their exchange last week, and we still haven't heard the official announcement on that. But this U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission, that's way back in 2020 it was a problem. So now we're hearing it's getting worse. You're having the banks are really limiting how many people they'll let in the bank a day to try to withdraw funds. The police are going after the people for trying to get their money out. I really want to implore you, think about your situation. Do you have a lot of cash sitting in the bank? Is that the safest place for you to leave it set when you're if you remember that pig from a few videos ago? He's snapping his jaws out there, and it's not just saying inflation and hyperinflation. It's saying bank runs, bank bail-ins. They're making a play for your 401k money. I'm going to urge you, take your funds out of the bank, keep some cash on hand, put some money into precious metals. I keep telling you, for me, that's silver. I just think silver is, it's a monetary metal, but it's also an industrial metal, and it has uses that, nothing else can fulfill the use in several applications that silver is used for. And you see the high demand coming in solar panels and battery operated cars. We're operating at a deficit now. We're taking about 850 to 900 million ounces out of the ground each year. We're using 1.1 billion ounces. And if you look going into the future, that's only going to be more because solar panels are increasing. Battery operated cars are going to be increasing, actually just to meet government standards. So I would encourage you, don't procrastinate anymore. Once the bank runs start, once it happens here in the U.S., it'll be just like back in 2008 when they came out and told us we're on the edge of a systemic failure of our banking system, and they're going to do whatever. There's not going to be any forewarning. They're going to tell you everything's great right up to that last second when it's not great. So I hope that helped. I hope knowing you can roll your 401k over with no tax consequences. I hope hearing a little bit about how I'm functioning with respect to use your local coin dealer to sell gold or silver each month in order to pay bills, but stay out of the banking system as much as you can, and how that's working for me. I would ask you, like the video and subscribe, and also there's a bell that you can click on and it will make you aware of new podcasts that come out. Thanks for listening. I look forward to talking to you on a future show. Hope you have a great evening.